was an entrepreneurial network with 43 aliases, 89 phone lines, 25 companies trading throughout the world. So it was complex and it was global. I'm talking, of course, of Howard Marks and his rather complex and fascinating supply chain. As I said, he was described at the start of this by the Daily Mail as the most sophisticated drugs baron of all time, which didn't please the Colombian cartel much, but he can't please everybody. He's also worked with the British Secret Service. He's been connected with the Mafia, the IRA, MI6, and the CIA. His autobiography remains an international bestseller. Please welcome Howard Marks, also known as Mr. Nice.
Hello. As with any typical supply chain, cannabis production begins with the ecological, biological, and political regulation of natural resources. Cannabis is a crop requiring appropriate soil, accommodating climate, irrigation, and agricultural manpower and instruments. Traditionally, cannabis seeds are planted in the spring, and the plant is harvested during the autumn. Harvesting entails cutting down the plants and hanging them upside down to dry in the sun. When dry, small stems, flowers, leaves, and seeds are retained as ordinary marijuana, while the larger stalks and stems are discarded as waste. Tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, is the primary psychoactive chemical in cannabis and occurs mainly in unpollinated floral clusters, usually referred to as buds. Sophisticated and well-researched agronomic techniques have been developed to maximize the size of these potent floral clusters. Typically, all the male plants are eliminated during the early growth of the plant. This lack of pollination causes the female plants to enlarge their buds in order to increase their chances of acquiring whatever pollen might be around. The result of this reproductively futile process is a crop of resin-rich, seed-free buds known as sensimilia. Hashish is produced by extracting resin from these buds. Shaking, rubbing, and running through densely planted cannabis crops while wearing adhesive clothing, such as hessian or something, are the traditional methods of extraction. The hashish is then molded into slabs. Most ordinary marijuana and almost all hashish found in exporting countries is cultivated by the indigenous population, whereas sensimilia production is done by both cultivators in traditional source countries and home growers in the country of consumption. So you've got a complication right from the word go. It's either been grown next door or 3,000 miles away. Transportation, all three transport modes of land, sea, and air are employed. Individuals own and operate private land vehicles, yachts, planes, while loosely knit organizations also use existing commercial freight systems. Payment to police, customs, military, coast guards, and other individuals in positions of authority is a common feature of these methods. The transportation of cannabis across national boundaries is highly illegal and occasions the most punitive penalties. Those engaged in this trade often make huge amounts of money, and unfortunately far too many of them spend several years behind bars. Domestic distribution. Most countries enthusiastically prohibit the purchase of even immediately consumable amounts of cannabis. The existence and enforcement of cannabis prohibition, coupled with the popularity of the herb, has spawned a myriad of illegal networks engaged in distribution. It is very hard for a street dealer to continue his business without being busted, or at the very least being documented as some kind of sociopath. A sizable and powerful proportion of the electorate believe that the taking of all drugs, including cannabis, but usually excluding alcohol, tobacco, and any legally prescribed pharmaceutical product, is inherently immoral, and that the rest of the population should abide by this ethic, even if they do not subscribe to it. The professions of law and law enforcement directly benefit from the current prohibition of cannabis. Powerful industrial groups such as the tobacco, alcohol, synthetic fiber, pharmaceutical, and fuel industries are fearful of the competition a legal cannabis industry might provide. Neither God nor nature wishes to sell the patent. One doesn't have to drill mines into Mother Earth nor destroy rainforests to harvest the prolific herb, so some multinationals might even go broke. Accordingly, the status quo remains. Cannabis consumers have to acquire cannabis from illegal sources, forcing otherwise law-abiding citizens to adopt mantles of crime. Prohibition-related crime, which commonly includes murder, violence, kidnap, theft, and fraud, and its pathological consequences continue. Sufferers of glaucoma, cancer, multiple sclerosis, insomnia, and several other ailments are denied available relief. Cost. Today, the production, export, import, transport, and retail distribution of cannabis carries the heavy cost of surviving confiscations by the government and ensuring against infiltration by law enforcement. Significant funds are used to establish information valves and blocks that afford protection to one level of distribution from the danger that might occur when an individual from another level is busted. As a result, current importation and distribution firms are inefficient, both in reducing costs and preserving and transmitting the useful information. Although this does have the fortunate consequence of supplying people with the opportunity of making a living, it also implies that costs and prices of currently illegal cannabis are inevitably greater than those that would prevail in an untaxed or moderately taxed legal market. Regulation. Virtually all proposals for the legalizing of cannabis share the common ground of insisting that marketed cannabis carry a strictly worded health warning and maintaining the illegality of the sale of cannabis to children. The areas of disagreement in legalization proposals tend to occur when consideration is given to the degree of government intervention. Monopoly obtains when the bulk of services is provided by one or very few business enterprises or government administrative agencies. Some legalization models have proposed a state monopoly of supply with all advertising illegal. Such a system, more often than not, leads to a relatively stable but hopelessly bureaucratized structure in which people perform routine roles as functionaries. In an oligopoly, a handful of enterprises constitute a cartel and dominate the market. This system seems equally hampered by bureaucratic paralysis. At the other extreme are suggestions that production and distribution be undertaken by a large number of relatively small competing private enterprises subject to government regulation. Yet others have explicitly limited state participation to zero, to punish them for having unleashed the violence and evils of prohibition on a well-meaning, peace-loving generation. Governments are unlikely to consciously vote themselves out of taking a hefty slice of the action through the administrative vehicle of regulation. However, governments should be allowed to intervene with their cudgels of regulation only if there is good reason to believe an improvement in consumer satisfaction will be achieved. Eventually, cannabis should be available in the same way as tea, coffee, or medicinal herbs. There are more marijuana consumers of voting age than ever before. Also, a greater number of non-users are now aware of cannabis, its relative harmlessness, and the irrational objections to the abolition of its prohibition. Older people are, albeit far too slowly, leaving the political system. The contributions to sanity made by the young replacements have so far been very few, but political leaders prepared to admit the inhaling of what they smoked seem to be finally emerging. Meanwhile, evidence of cannabis's therapeutic qualities continues to pile up and be endorsed by respected and authoritative members of the medical profession. Legalization, I sincerely believe, is inevitable, whether desirable or not. However, the transition from the current illegal market to a regular market will not happen overnight, and it will not happen smoothly. Large sections of the public will be resistant to the change. There will also be resistance to legalization from perhaps unexpected quarters. The hardened and heavy pot smoker is often convinced that should cannabis be legalized, government and big business will inevitably wreck the quality and the quantity of the product available. Many consumers will continue to prefer to buy cannabis in the manner to which they are accustomed. Commercialism and other capitalistic characteristics might turn cannabis into a bland, ineffectual, designer-produced non-entity, like non-tox beer or sliced bread. Who's going to do it? Let us for a while think the unthinkable. Imagine that 3 of the most popular illegal recreational drugs, cannabis, cocaine, and LSD, have been legalized. How could we market them? In many ways, it would be like marketing anything else. One would be obliged, as with most products, to satisfy the consumer by providing choice, quality, and control. But we have a unique situation here, where for the first time, legally, a product is being retailed with which most potential customers are familiar. Accordingly, it would be necessary to honor ritual, kit, and the experience. Now let's start with cannabis. What would we be trying to get across? Relaxation, peace, comfort, homeliness, friendly enlightenment. And what would be a suitable brand name? I think Buddha would be fine. And how would we package it? A simple box would do, it's just a herb. Cigarettes might still be legal. Or there's chocolate for the anti-smoking brigade. Advertising would be straightforward, magazine, dare I say, roadside. What about cocaine? What are we trying to get across there? Sexiness, elegance, style, sophistication. What about a brand name for cocaine? It's there already, toot. Packaging? Well, I think, something like that would work, perhaps with a blade inside or something like that. I mean, let's at least and at last try to get rid of the toilet vibe from it. Advertising would again be straightforward, like either in a magazine or, again, roadside. Finally, what about LSD? What are we trying to get across there? I think really fun, escapism, creativity, and more importantly than all, traveling without leaving a carbon footprint. Advertising, well, first of all, brand name. What would be a good brand name for it? I think Trips would do. Packaging, I think make it look like something you'd buy in a pharmacy, really, A blister pack of 6 tablets. Everyone needs to have it one day off a week, I think. Push the carbon-friendly stuff. So, it would all be quite easy, I think, wouldn't it? Plenty of marketing channels available. Now, as you might have guessed, I think it appropriate for the running of legalized cannabis supply to be carried out by some of those who have already committed themselves to or have experience in the currently illegal supply of cannabis. It will be a great pity not to salvage the many honourable, trust-laden and fruitful relationships and alliances that have been established between growers and other participants in the countries of origin and importers resident in the destination countries. That concludes my short speech. Thank you very much indeed.
Howard Marks. Howard, come and have a seat.
Assuming it was legalised, how quickly do you think you could get things up and running?
By tomorrow.
Are things going your way, do you think? Or is the status quo still the political default position?
Yes, no, I'd say the latter things are, well, I suppose things are going my way, as you rather kindly put it. But terribly slowly, I mean, like in a very pilgrimage fashion. And of course, the link between cannabis psychosis and schizophrenia hasn't helped at all. But it is, I think it's still largely a generational thing.
And you said that the older politicians were fading out, but you clearly have never been to a Conservative Party conference.
No, I haven't.
Or where the average age is about 68.
Cannabis, is a very sort of peace and love thing in its roots, and still.
And even in the dealing, the cocaine's a different.
Cocaine is different. They are different products. Yeah.
And they're for different dealers. The cannabis dealers are nice and cuddly like you.
Yes.
And cocaine dealers are Scarface.
Scarface.
All right. Listen, we have to leave it there. It's 5 o'clock. But I think Howard's available for consultancy on supply chains at any time. It was a great way to end the plenary session this afternoon. A round of applause, please, for Howard Marks. Nice to see you again, Howard. Good to see you.